Good to see everybody in the Lord's house this morning. How many glad you're saved?
Amen.
Good to be saved. Good to have the health to be in His house this morning. It looks a little like springtime out there today. Ain't gonna be long. And it's been a long winter. The Lord knows what He's doing. Some springtime's coming. Something to look forward to. It's good to be here this morning. Everybody's had a good week. Hope you've come looking for the Lord to do something today. I'd like to see Him do something different. They get a blessing before we leave here this morning. Got your Bible? Turn to the book of 2 Kings, chapter number 4. 2 Kings, chapter number 4. 2 Kings, chapter 4. Again, reading down about verse number 8. This should be familiar scripture. Be dealing with one of the great Bible prophets, a man by the name of Elisha, in this chapter this morning. Learn something from these Old Testament saints. 2 Kings chapter 4, verse number 8. And it fell on a day that Elisha passed the Shunammite, where was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. And it was and so it was that as often as passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread. And she said unto her husband, Behold, I now perceive that this is a holy man of God, which passeth by continually. Let us make a little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall be, when he cometh to us, that he shall turn thither. And it fell on a day that it came thither, and it turned into the chamber and lay there. And he said unto Gehazi his servant, Call the Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him, and said unto him, Say unto her, Behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What is to be done for thee? Wouldest thou be spoken for to the king or to the captain of hosts? And she answered, I dwell among my own people. And he said, What then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, Verily she hath no child, and her husband is old. And he said, Call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the door. And he said, About this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, Nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thy handmaid. And the woman conceived and bare a son, and at that season that Elisha had said unto her, according to the time of life. And when the child was grown, it fell on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers, and he said unto his father, my head, and said to a lad, Carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him, he brought him to his mother, and he sat on her knees till noon, then he died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door upon him, and went out. And she called unto her husband, and said, Send me, I pray thee, one of the young men, and one of the asses, that I might run to the man of God, and come again. And he said, Wherefore wilt thou go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, It shall be well. Then she saddled an ass, and said to her servant, Drive and go forward, slack not the riding for me, except I bid thee. So she went and came to the man of God to Mount Carmel. And it came to pass, when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to Gehazi his servant, Behold, yonder is the Shunammite. Run now, I pray thee, to meet her, and say unto her, It is well with thee. Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with thy child? And she answered, It is well. And when she came to the man of God to the hill, she caught him by the feet, but Gehazi came near to thrust her away. And the man of God said, Let her alone, for her soul is vexed within her, and the Lord hid it from me, and hath not told me. Then said, Did I desire a son of my Lord? Did I not say, Do not deceive me? Then he said, Gehazi, gird up thy loins, and take my staff in thy hand, and go thy way. If they meet any man, salute him not. And if any salute thee, answer him not again. And lay my staff upon the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he arose and followed her. And Gaza passed on before them, and laid the staff upon the face of the child. But there was neither voice nor hearing. Whereof he went again to meet him, and told him, saying, The child is not waked. And when Elisha was come into the house, behold, the child was dead, and laid upon his bed. And he went therefore and shut the door upon them twine, and prayed unto the Lord. And he went up and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands. And he stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. Then he returned and walked in the house to and fro, and went and stretched himself upon him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gaza and said, Call the Shunammite. So he called her, and when she was come unto him, he said, Take up my son, take up thy son. And she went in and fell at his feet, and bowed herself to the ground, and took up her son, and went out. You see here in 2 Kings chapter 4, it's dealing with this man by the name of Elisha. And the Bible said that there was a great woman in this chapter also. And everybody pretty much knows this story. Elisha, was the great prophet. He was the one that followed Elijah. And Elisha was the one that had the double portion upon his life. Had so many miracles God worked through this man. And we see another miracle he worked here in chapter 4 in 2 Kings. And as the story read, Elisha was the prophet. He was the man that came through this town quite often. And most of these prophets didn't have nowhere to lay their head, nowhere to rest. They had to depend on the people of God to take care of them. And this one woman noticed that Elisha was a great man of God, and he kept continually coming through their town. And you notice that this woman and her husband built a room in their house just for Elisha. The Bible said there in verse 10 they built it on the wall. So I believe they probably built this room probably inside their house. And it talks about in this chapter they went up to it. So I believe they maybe built a room in that house, maybe up on the second floor of their house. A place for the man of God to lay down and rest when he came through. And this story, this woman didn't have any children. She was up in age, and her husband was up in age also. Elisha told her she was going to have a child because the way that she had taken care of the man of God. Remember, this boy's born. I don't know how old he's got up to. The Bible said it fell on a day he was out in the field with his daddy. Something happened to him. He began to cry that his head. They take him back to his mother, and the boy dies. Now, that's pretty much what's going on in this chapter right here that we've just read. But we're talking about a great Bible character by the name of Elisha and a great woman. Hey, this woman loved the man of God. I mean, you think about this man, and Elisha, he loved God also. And I believe Elisha desired that God would do some great things through him. I'm glad there's still some men of God around that God will work through if they're willing.
Right.
And God will work through each and every one of us if we're willing this morning. I want you to get a hold of this down here in about verse number 18, I guess, just for a minute. The Bible said it when the child was grown, or down about verse number 8. It said that it fell on a day that Elisha passed to Shunammite, where was a great woman. The Bible said it fell on a day right there. Now I want you to get a hold of this. This woman didn't have any children. Now back in that day, a woman that didn't have a child was looked down upon. A lot of the other women would make fun of them, act like there's something wrong with them, and especially if they didn't have a man-child. Hey, they were looked down on in society just simply because they didn't have any children. And you look here in verse 9, the Bible said that woman said, and the Bible said, and she said unto her husband, Behold, now I perceive that this is a holy man of God. Man, ain't you glad that you've met some holy men of God in your lifetime? I'll get somewhere with this in just a minute. It's going to take a little bit to get into it. Because you know, I was thinking last night, man, it's been a blessing to have some holy men of God in your life. I can think back down over my life from the time I was young up till now. Man, I've had an opportunity to meet some great men of God. Sit and listen to them preach. Bring some blessings into your life. Glad I got to hear a holy man of God preach the day I got saved. Brought conviction to my heart. But I want you to notice there in verse number 8, the Bible said, and it fell on a day. I want to show you some things. We're going to work our way down through this chapter. But I believe as verse number 8 starts right here, I believe you can see there's a setting up in this chapter right here. And you say, well, what are you talking about a setting up? You know, if something falls on a day, I believe in God's mind or in our mind, it's something that's being set up. It's a day that was appointed for something. So when you see right here, the Bible said it fell on a day. There's some things getting ready to be set up in this woman's life. There's some sovereign things getting ready to be set up. And me and you need to realize there's going to be some things set up in our life that we may not even understand at times, that is sovereign the way God looks at it. Now when things are set up by God, hey, there's not going to be anything me and you're going to be able to do about it this morning. Now there was a setting up. Now when there's a setting up took place, look what happened in verse number 8. It fell on a day that Elisha passed to Shunammite, where was a great woman. Now I'm going to give you a few simple things real quick as we get into this. As God, the Bible said, it fell on a day, there was a setting up. And look what happened right here. This Shunammite woman and a prophet by the name of Elijah. I don't know if this is the first time they've met or if they've met on other occasions. But God lets these two people come together. You ever thought in your life there was a setting up that God lets you meet certain people in life? Hey, I've thought the last few days there's a lot of people that God set it up that come into my life that affected some things in my life. It affected my life spiritually. Hey, I've met some people that's affected my life probably financially along the way as I've went. You know, when this woman run into Elijah, God was doing something in them in both of their lives. Man, I thought back last night, man, you hear a lot of folks say anymore that there's nothing good comes out of any of these cities, and you hear it said especially a lot right here in the mountains that nothing comes out good out of Asheville anymore. Man, I got to thinking, man, there's a little old brown-eyed girl sitting right back there. About 20 years ago, God let her come into my life, set up a day. Hey, she stood beside me. She's been my help. She's been beside me every step of the way. Hey, man, me and you better be glad this morning that God set up a day, that He put a woman in your life that stuck with you, and you better stick with her and tell her you love her along the way. Hey, man, you think about all the good friends that God set up, the people that He's put in your life. Man, there's been people in my life down through the years, I don't know what I would have done without those people. The friends that I've had, the men of God that He's put in my life. You look here in chapter 4, God's put this man and woman together. Hey, now I'm not talking about a physical relationship or anything. God has put a man of God in this woman's life, because He knew she was going to need some help along the way. You ever stopped and thought about all the people that God's put in your life that He set up? Hey, you think back some of the old folks that may have been in this church years ago that are already in heaven. God put them in your life for a purpose. The men of God that stood behind this pulpit down through the years, He put them in your life for a purpose. And God's putting Elisha in this woman's life for a purpose. Now you think about all the people that He set up in your life. And you think about something else. You look what happened here in verse number 11. The Bible said it fell on a day that he came thither and turned into the chamber and lay there. Now God was setting people up in this woman's life. And look what He's done also. He is setting a place up in Elisha's life, in this woman's life. The Bible said in verse number 11, they finished this room and Elisha's got a chamber to go to. Hey, I bet you if you could talk to Elisha this morning, Elisha would tell you, man, God set some places up in his life. You ever thought about the places that God set up in your life down through the years? Not only the people and the lives that He's put in your life, but the places. Man, you better be glad this morning that you've got a place to come to worship that God set up. Hey, you think about all the places down through life that you found some blessings. Man, we get to the place a lot of times we don't think about the places that God's put us in. The blessings of life that He's given us. Now, you know nothing happens by accident with God. I mean, everything is set up for His children. Man, we ought to thank God for the people He's put in our life, the places that He's put in our lives. And man, you think about all the times, man, that we were just going through life looking around and being careless. And the Almighty God put some places in our life that we don't realize how many blessings have come from. Man, we've been blessed beyond measure. Hey, the Bible said it fell on a day. And you know, I'm glad God set some things up, people in our lives. You know, when God puts people in our lives, God's doing some things in us. But the places He's put in our lives, God's doing some things for us. I mean, He's done more for us this morning than we could ever begin to thank Him for. He said in verse 8, it fell on a day. That's when the people came together. Then verse number 11, it fell on a day when Elisha had a place. Then you look in verse number 18. The Bible said when the child was grown, it fell on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers. Now there's something else right here that God's setting up in this woman's life. The Bible said it fell on a day. Now you get in verse number 18 down through about verse number 20. There's something begins to happen in this woman's life. Hey, it fell on a day that there was some pain going to come into her life. Yeah, there's going to be some pain come into our lives. There's going to be a time that God sets some pain to come up into our life. Now that's when God is doing something in us when the pain comes. Now let me say, now don't take what I'm getting ready to say wrong. There's going to be a time that's set up in our life that God will hurt you, but He won't harm you. Now get what I'm saying. There's going to be a time that God will let some hurt come into our lives. It may not be physical. It may be mental hurt sometimes. It may be hurt that we're going through something in our family. It may be a hurt that somebody's done to you. God will let us hurt, but God will never harm us. God's not going to do anything to intentionally harm you in this life. Now there's no doubt somewhere along the way God's going to set some pain up in our lives. He's going to set some hurt up. We need to get that in our mind. We don't understand sometimes. We think we're above these things. That this hurt and pain is going to only happen to somebody else. But God lets some things come sometimes to help us, to learn us some things. Now we need to realize there's going to be some hurt coming into our lives. But you know, I'm glad that God loves His children this morning. Now there's some pain and hurt that's been set up in this woman's life. Hey, I got 2 children back there this morning. And I'd do anything in the world for them that's possible. I'd lay my life down for them. I wish I could give them a whole lot more than what I can. And there's times in life that they've come to me and say, Daddy, I'd really like to have this. And there's times I've got to say no. There may be something that I've got to say no about because it may harm them. Hey, it may hurt them a little bit, may hurt their feelings a little bit because I wouldn't let them have this or the other. But it's the reason because I don't want it to harm them. Hey, God's somebody that's going to let us go through some things, but He'll never harm us. But there's going to be some hurt come into our life. We're looking at this Shunammite woman. In verse 18 through 20, man, there was some hurt and pain came into her life. But God was there. Hey, we don't have to go through this hurt and pain in life by ourselves. We've got a God that'll never leave us or never forsake us. And when that hurt and pain come, it didn't catch God off guard. Hey, when this little boy dies in this chapter, it didn't catch God off guard. He knew that this was coming. Now look at this. We said there was a setting up there. There was a day that people, Elisha and this woman came together, set up a friendship. Then the places in their life. Then there's some pain that comes to their life. But you look also in this shaking up in verse number 20. With this setting up, there was a little bit of shaking up went on in this woman's life. The Bible said when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he set her on her knees till noon and then died. Hey, in this setting up, now let me say what I'm trying to talk to you about this morning. When your gladness turns to sadness. Now, when that gladness turns to sadness, there's a setting up in our life a lot of times. And God set up a shaking up in this woman's life in verse number 20. That boy died. Now let me say, you better be careful how you think you might react when something happens in your life. Have you ever thought about that? This boy's died. You better be careful how that you say you would react. And I believe mom and dads ought to be careful this morning and don't never say I would do that or I wouldn't do that. And you better be careful to say that your children may never do that because they may very well do what you say they'll never do. Now, we need to be careful. I'm getting somewhere with this. We also better be careful not to talk about people a lot of times what they're going through. Hey, unless you've been in somebody's shoes and walked in their place, you don't know what they're going through. I don't know what this woman was going through right here. I understand what's going on, but I've not been in her shoes. We're real good a lot of times say, well, I know what you're going through. You have no idea unless you've been there. I've never lost my mom or daddy. I've never lost we've got a child in heaven. I've never lost a wife. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it's like to go through. And you can't run up to somebody and say, well, I know what you're going through. You can't. You can pray for them. You can try to encourage them, but there's no way to know unless you've been there. I don't know what this woman's going through right here. But notice there's been a shaking up in her life. That boy's died. He's laid in her lap and died. This boy was a great blessing to her. This boy brought joy to her life, brought a lot of gladness. Now you see her gladness is turned to sadness right here. And there's been a shaking up in her life. Everything was probably going good, going great. She had a child. She was proud of it. Had the man of God come in and stand in her house every once in a while and bringing some blessings. Had a good husband, probably, according to what we can see in the Scripture. But her gladness is turned to sadness. Ain't it amazing how our gladness can turn to sadness real quick? Everything going good, everything going perfect. Hey, we're one phone call away from being shook up this morning. Hey, we're one phone call away from it. From being where this woman's at this morning. Hey, there's a season of a burden going on in her life. Now look, when this season of burden right here has been set up, Look at the severity of her burden. Hey, this was her child. It wasn't the neighbor's child. You ever think about that? It's her child. Hey, I've heard folks talk about before maybe going into surgery or something like this. And you know the difference in major surgery and minor surgery? Major surgery is when you're having it, minors when somebody else is having it. You ever thought about that when you're laying there stretched out, getting ready to have surgery? Man, it's major. I don't care if it's a hangnail they're cutting off. But when somebody else is having it, it's minor. I mean, you need to think about it. Yeah, I mean, you ever hear them people say, well, you'll be all right, you'll make it through it, this is just minor? You ever felt like looking at them and say, well, why don't you just take one for the team and lay down there and have it yourself? I mean, we look at things like that. Somebody else is going through it, it don't mean much. Look at the severity of this woman's burden. You know, it's a big difference when it's at your neighbor's house and it's not at yours. I mean, it makes a big difference when something's going on at your neighbor's and it's not going on at your house. Everything may be going good at your house, but it may not be across the road. Everything may be going good at this church, and it may not be going good at the next one. Hey, this woman's going through something. Hey, you ever stopped and really thought these things could be going on at my house tonight? They could be going on at your house tonight. They could be going on at your house next week. Look at the severity of this woman's burden. It was her child. Meant something to her, meant the world to her. And now this child's gone. You imagine what she was going through? This child was a miracle. Never had any children up in age, and Elisha said, you're going to have a child. Fell on a day when she had the child, it was set up. Fell on a day it was set up when he died. Now you look at something else here. Look at the suddenness of her burden. Look what it said up here in verse number 20 also. Bible said that when he had taken him, brought him to his mother, and he sat on her knees till noon, then died. Look when the Bible said he died right there. He died at noon. Look how sudden this was. Died at noon when the sun was the brightest. When it was shining the highest. That's when it came the darkest for her. We think about a lot of these things just happening in the midnight hour, happening in the middle of the night. This was noon when the sun was the brightest and when it was the highest. Her burden got the darkest. Right in the middle of the day. Now you better learn to shout, buddy, more than just on a feeling, because this life will knock the feeling out of you sometimes. Hey, I've had it knocked out of me several times. Man, there was something shaking going on right here. You know, I wonder if there's anybody in this building, you ever been shook? You ever had anything to really shake you? You know, I was thinking last night, man, two things that can shake me more than anything sitting right back there, them two young'uns. They can shake me and my wife more than anything. Hey, they can get to hurting, something going on, may not be a physical hurt. Maybe something they're going through with people around them, something that's happened they're struggling with. You know what gets me about more than anything? Knowing they're hurting, and that look that they can just give you, name that you know something's going on. Hey, that ought to tear us up when our young'uns is going through something. That ought to shake us when they're going through some things. Man, I was thinking last night, I've been preaching now, I think about 28, 29 years right in there. And man, I've seen some things down through the years that shook me out of people. Pastored a church over in Burnsville, I guess 6 or 7 years ago, a good church. And all of a sudden, there were some things one time started happening. Man, shook me. I said, that can't happen right here. God, why is that happening? Why is people doing things like this? Hey, it'll shake you. Hey, man, I've had things go on with my children, sicknesses and different things that shook us. But you know, there was always a God right there with us. Man, you better think this morning, man, just because you're saved, you're not immune from trouble. Had an old preacher tell me years back, named Brother James Beaver, he's up in his 90s now. think he's in the nursing home over in Burnsville. That old man had the power of God on him. Pastored for about 60-some years. Told me one time I went to preach for him, he said, let me give you some advice. He said, you ever get to the place you don't know what really to preach on, you get in the pulpit, and it happens sometimes. You don't know which direction to go, what to say. He said, son, just preach on trouble everybody's got. Hey man, everybody's got trouble. I don't care where you go, some people's trouble might be bigger. But you know, some things are bigger to some people than others. Some things bothers people in different ways. But young people, I mean, my youngins this morning, they need to realize this morning, you may not have much trouble right now, but somewhere down the road, it's set up, you're going to have some trouble and problems. There's going to be some things hit you right out of the dark that you didn't expect. Hey, you're going to have trouble when you begin dating people. You're going to have trouble when you get married. You're going to have financial troubles. You're going to have trouble sometimes, probably maybe between your husband and wife. There's going to be trouble. This woman didn't expect this. She come in the middle of the day when the sun's the brightest, and it got the darkest for her. And you know, man, we need to be careful how we treat people when things happen. We don't know what they're going through. Hey, there was a setting up right here. And there was a shaking up in this woman's life. And you look in verse 21. The Bible said when she went up and laid on the bed of the man of God and shut the door upon him and went out. There was something else being set up right here. The Bible said she shut the door. There was a shutting up right here. Hey, you notice she's in this room by herself. The man of God wasn't there right now. Laid this boy on the bed. And you know, I don't know what she said when she went in there. You ever stopped and thought, man, when we shut the door? Hey, look, I mean, she went in this man's room. She's built this man a room right here. Hey, she must have wanted him to stay a while. Because the Bible said they built this room on the wall. They thought a lot of the man of God. She laid him on the man of God's bed. And you know, she was making room for others, and God was going to make room for her too. I'll get somewhere with this in just a minute. There was a shutting up right here. You need to remember, you'll never go wrong doing right to God's people. This man loved the man of God so much. This really wasn't an addition onto the house. They put a room on the inside of that house for him. Hey, they loved him so much. It was going to be a permanent place. You know, you won't go wrong helping God's people. There'll be blessings there. It'll put energy back in your church. Hey, you ever stop and thought the devil will let us come out and meet all we want to? But he don't like ministries coming out of the church. You know, the church wasn't ever meant to be a reservoir. It was meant to be a channel. It was meant to channel things out to the world, channel the word out, channel it out to missionaries, channel it out to those who don't have much. You imagine this woman right here early on in this chapter, she began to have this going on in her mind about building this room. Got to thinking last night, she probably went to buttering up her husband. May have been about like some of you women, maybe you wanted to get a new dress or pocketbook. Go to buttering that husband up. Man, coming around, I'd like to have this. Couldn't you imagine her saying, honey, man, wouldn't it be good if we built a room for the man of God in our house? Somewhere he could have to lay his head. Somewhere he could have to rest. Somewhere he could have when he comes by to go pray. Go get a message together. Can't you imagine God bumping up against that husband? Looking at her and saying, Mama, that'll be all right. I believe it'd be good. I believe it'd be good that we can put a place here for the man of God. You know, us as men, a lot of times we're real big and tough. We act like we're the head of the house. Hey, man, you need to stop and think, man. A lot of times we got to get some permission. You say, well, you hen pack. No, we got hen house ways a whole lot. Hey, man, well, we got to talk together, got to do things together. Can't you imagine that man right there thinking, well, we need to do this. You know, if he hadn't done that, Mama probably wouldn't have been happy. If Mama ain't happy in the house, nobody is. Hey, man, that's the way it is, man. He was doing something to please his wife. Man, you know, if me and you'd love our wives the way like God loved the church, we'd go a long way with God. You know, you make room for others, God will always make room for me and you. You know, God never intended, I said a minute ago, for the church to just be a reservoir. It ought to be a channel. You know why God blesses some places and He don't bless others? A lot of places just won't let Him. They won't let God bless. You know, they just need to get God in mind. You know, churches need. I mean, this woman was taking care of the man of God. She went in his room and shut the door. Man, you know, we need to get behind our preachers again. Get behind our pastors. Here's a man that was just passing through every now and then. And his family got behind him and took care of him. Hey, man, they was going to let him have some say what went on in their house. Hey, man, they was going to listen to him. You know, it's always amazed me. A lot of churches will trust their souls will trust the children of their souls to the man of God to preach to them. They'll trust their soul to the children. I mean, they'll trust their soul to the man of God that he'll tell them about hell, tell them about heaven. But it's always amazed me. A lot of churches won't trust the man of God with anything else around the house of God. I mean, it may get quiet and you talk about that. The man of God's supposed to be, he's the under shepherd in the house of God. It's always amazed me how a lot of churches won't trust the man of God with the finances around the house of God, what needs to be done. A lot of churches won't trust the man of God making the decisions around the house of God, but they'll sure trust him with their children, but they won't trust him with nothing else. It ain't right. These folks trusted this man enough to bring him into the house of God. Man, it gets quiet when you talk about stuff like that. People don't amen. They don't shake their head. But you know, God put a pastor in the church to be the under shepherd, to run the house of God. The man of God is responsible if nobody else is. No deacon's responsible for it. Hey, the deacon's job in the house of God, the Bible said, you look that word deacon up to be a servant. It ain't taking a step up, it's really taking a step down. And it's a blessing when the church has got good deacons that'll fall in and help the man of God. A lot of folks has got that out of line. You look in 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus, you'll find out how the church is supposed to be run. I mean, it gets quiet when you talk about things like that. We don't want to get out of our way and do things the way the book says. This thing's set up in a manner that God will only bless when it's done by the way the book says. Gets quiet, don't it? When we get right down to where we're at. I mean, man, you think about it. They brought this man into their home, taking care of him. A lot of churches say, well, we don't think you're to do that. The Bible talks about the laborers worthy of his reward. The Bible talks about the laborers worthy of double honor. And I can get into a lot of things on that. Then you get people looking every direction in the world. But man, you look what they're doing to this man right here. You know, you know, a lot of folks, something popped in my mind, it'd help a lot of folks if they'd have sat under Moses. Yeah, how do you think Moses would have run a church? How do you think Moses would have done this? Hey, can't you imagine when they came out of Israel, or when they came out of Egypt down there going down to the Red Sea? And man, Pharaoh right behind them Egyptians flying on them chariots. Can't you imagine them get down to the Red Sea and Moses looking out there, looking back, saying children were getting ready to cross. They probably was a bunch of Baptists in that. Can't you imagine one of them popping up and saying, Moses, we ain't voted on this yet. We ain't voted whether or not we're going to cross. Hey, you know what? I believe Moses looked at that crowd, said, you can do what you want to, but I'm getting ready to part this, and we're going to cross, or you can go back home with Pharaoh. Hey, man, that's the way the men of God used to be. They would take charge. They'd get their place. This pulpit's a place of authority in the house of God. We've got to the place people don't like that. We've got to the place we want to do it our way. And you wonder why God don't bless? We're not doing it the way the book says. We're not lining it up no more. Man, can't you imagine, man, we got a big God that would do things with little people and little things if we just let Him. You look here in verse number 21. The Bible said, and she went up and laid him on the bed of God, the man of God, and shut the door upon him and went out. Hey, I noticed something right here. She shut the door. You ever noticed when you shut the door, you can just tell God whatever you want to? Nobody else around, just you and God. Have you ever been in one of them meetings somewhere, maybe on the job, maybe even the church, maybe an important meeting? You get in and sit down, and somebody says, shut the door. You know why? They don't want everybody else hearing this. Don't want everybody else knowing what's going on. Hey, this woman has shut the door. And man, I don't know how long she was in there before she come back out. She was in there by herself. She was in there with that boy laying on the man of God's bed. You know, a lot of times the reason we don't see God move, we're leaving the door open instead of shutting it. I know we got to have the door open to feel God. We got to have the church. But there's times we just need to shut that door. Get in that prayer closet by ourselves. Hey, they was a shutting up right here. You know, we don't really a lot of times want to tell God what's really wrong with us. You ever think we don't really want to tell Him? We think we're so tough and we're so big, we can do this, that, and the other. Hey, God's not wanting you to really... God's not wanting you to tell Him what's wrong so He can find out. He already knows. He wants us to tell Him what's wrong. Just simply and be honest with Him. You know, wouldn't it be a blessing maybe if somebody here this morning had a burden? They might get in this altar or get somewhere today and just shut that door. Just shut that door with God. Let Him come in. And walk out with peace like they've never had. Hey, this woman's got a burden right here. Got that burden at midday. She's went in and shut the door. Look what she's done right here. They was just shutting up. And look in verse 24. The Bible said that she called him and to her husband. Or verse 24, the Bible said, then she saddled an ass and said unto the servant, drive, go forward, slack not. Thou riding for me, except I bid thee. Look, they was a shutting up, then this woman saddled up right here. Hey, look what she's done. She's not going looking for the undertaker. She's going and looking for somebody that can help her. There wasn't going to be no help from the undertaker. All the undertaker do, take him out and put him in the ground. But this woman had tuck him into the man of God's bedroom, laid him on the bed, shut the door. I believe she probably talked to God a little bit, then here she goes to find the man of God. And you look in verse 25, the Bible said, and she went and came unto the man of God to Mount Carmel. And it came to pass when the man of God saw her afar off that he said to Gaza, his servant, behold, yonder is that Shunammite. Hey, she saddled up. Then look here, there's some summing up getting ready to take place here in verse 25 and on. She's went to look for Elisha. She's found him and the servant at Mount Carmel. She's coming a ways off. Elijah sees her, tells the servant to go see what's the matter. Servant goes to her, but man, she keeps it going. The Bible said that she grabbed Elisha there by the feet. Bible said the servant went to pushing her back. Elijah said, stop, that woman's soul is vexed. Said that woman's got a problem. Hey, I believe that woman began to tell Elisha what's went on. God hadn't told Elisha about this. You can find on down in this chapter. Didn't know what went on. He's found out this boy's died. This woman's soul's vexed. She's got a heavy burden. And he tells the servant, said, you take my staff and you run ahead of us and go lay that staff upon that boy. Hey, I believe Elijah had so much faith that that staff was going to do something to that boy. I believe Elijah had so much faith that that staff was going to bring breath back into him. But look what happened down about verse 34. That woman begins to beg Elisha. She said, Elisha, I ain't leaving. You come with me. You know, we ought to be like that with God a lot of times. We ought to beg Him and tell Him we ain't going nowhere doing nothing. He goes with us. Man, He ought to be right beside us every step of the way. Hey, they get back and look what Elisha does in verse 34. He looks and finds out that staff ain't done nothing yet. There's no breath in him. There's no life in him. He's still dead. He's not moving. And Elisha gets in verse 34. And the Bible said, and he went up and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands, and he stretched forth upon himself the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. There's something caught my eye right here. You notice everything Elijah's done in verse 34? He's put his mouth upon his child, his eyes upon him. But the Bible said, and he stretched himself upon the child. Man, I got to thinking, how does a grown man stretch himself upon a child? I mean, how does a grown man stretch himself to fit a child? He's probably bigger than this boy. How does he stretch himself to fit a child? You know, I was thinking last night, you know, I found through life, I really find it hard sometimes to stretch myself to become like a child. And I'll get somewhere with this in a minute, let you know what I'm talking about. You know, if I could just simply trust Him like a child and respond to Him as a child. You know, when we were children, we never really worried about much of anything. We didn't worry about where food was coming from. Well, I mean, we really didn't. We just worried about we was going to have some fun, what we was going to do the next day. We didn't have all these burdens on us like we do now. You know, you remember one time that Jesus was out there. He was trying to do some teaching with the disciples. You remember there was a crowd of children trying to get to Jesus. And Jesus, those children kept trying to get to Him. The disciples started pushing them away. Said, leave Him alone. Remember, Jesus looked at them disciples and said, back off, leave them children alone. He said, boys, you need to learn something. He said, if you ain't like those children, you ain't going to get to me either. Hey, we need to be childlike. We need to stretch ourselves to be like a child. Hey, Jesus said we've got to be childlike. We've got to have that childlike mentality. Coming to Him and just telling Him what's on our mind. Coming to Him and telling Him what we want. Coming to Him even when we're whining like children do sometimes. He told the disciple, He said, boys, you got to be like them. I mean, you got to come to us innocent. That's the way we need to be. You know, it's hard sometimes for us to try to stretch ourselves like a child. But you know, God does big things a lot of times with little people. Does big things with just a handful. But you look right here, Elisha stretched himself to become little. You know, we've got to the place we know how to do so much. We know when to do it, how to do it, what to say. You know, we've got so big. We've got too big for our britches, I guess you could say a lot of times. We don't want to get little. Hey, Elisha was stretching himself to come like this boy. Man, there's a summing up here. You say, what's that? You know, guys have put the staff on this boy and it wasn't working. You ever thought about that? That staff was just a piece of wood. You know, an empty cross would do no good either. It's just a piece of wood empty. Hey, that staff was doing no good. Just a piece of wood. When things begin to change for this boy, is when Elisha stretched himself. Man, I'm sure glad one day, man, there was somebody stretched theirself at Calvary. You think about that old cross, him stretching out right there. And He brought life to a place that brought death. Man, He stretched Himself out. Can you imagine Elisha laying there? Kind of looked like a cross there laying on that bed on top of that boy. Man, he brought life back into something that was dead. And ain't you glad at Calvary one day Christ stretched himself out upon an old cross. Brought life to a world that brought death. Hey, nobody else could do that this morning but Jesus Christ. The Bible said warmth came into his body when Elisha stretched out. Hey, the Bible said there where we was reading there a minute ago about that room up there, that she went up. Hey, can't you imagine this woman right here? I mean, the Bible even said up in verse 35 that Elisha, when he returned and walked in the house to and fro. This is after he'd stretched out on him. The Bible said there was just warmth. But man, there wasn't much life yet. He wasn't sneezed yet. He wasn't breathing yet. The Bible said Elisha walked to and fro back through that house. Elisha was pacing back and forth. You imagine Elisha probably talking to God and saying, God, you got to do something. He ain't breathing yet. There ain't no life yet. What am I going to do? Then Elisha stretched himself again upon that boy in verse 35. And the Bible said the child sneezed 7 times. Getting all that cleaned out. Getting to breathing again. Stretched himself on. Hey, Elisha was pacing right there. Man, you know, I'm glad along the way that Jesus stretched out and brought life on that cross a long time ago. Hey, man, old Elisha, man, had some people counting on him. Man, there was a setting up right there. Can you imagine when that woman started up them steps to hit that first step? Oh, Elisha's been up there pacing. That woman's probably been down there pacing. Can't you imagine when that woman hit that first step going upstairs, the devil said, I can't understand why you built that room for that preacher. Hey, she don't know what's going on up there yet. She don't know what's just happened. Can't you imagine when she steps up on that second step right there? And that preacher says, I can understand why you're serving God. Look what just happened. Your gladness became sadness. It got dark at noon for you. Hey, you better be careful. The old devil will climb all over you sometimes. Get you to thinking this, get you to thinking that. Hey, you may be on that first step this morning yourself. But ain't you glad that's not the last one? You may be on that first step this morning. Man, you may be on that first step. And I'm glad it ain't the last one. Hey, you ain't got to that last one yet. Let me tell you something. When you're at that last one, it's going to fix all our problems. Hey, when we hit that last step one of these days, it's going to fix every problem we got. You say you're crazy this morning. Hey, can't you imagine Elisha's been pacing and that woman's been pacing? And about that time she gets to that last step and opens that door. And the little boy says, hello, Mama. Can't you remember, man, that sadness, that gladness had turned to sadness? Man, she's rejoicing now. She's hit that last step. Hey, you might be on that first step this morning. Hey, I don't know where you're at. I don't know what you're going through. Hey, you might be on that middle step. Hey, you might be getting to the place, maybe getting about like that woman was. You may be a patient. Hey, I do a lot of patience a lot of times in my life. But you know, I'm glad I've took that first step. Hey, you might be on that middle step this morning. You might be on that second step. But man, I bet you one thing this morning. I can bet you when that woman got up to about that last step, man, I bet you that woman was looking up when she got about to that last step. Man, I bet she was looking up to another world. Man, I bet she was looking up to another place. Because I can tell you something, man, when we get to that last step, man, that last step right there took care of all that woman's problems. And it took care of all her troubles. Man, I'm glad there's going to be a day I took that first step. When I get to that middle one, and man, when I get to that last step and God opens that door, Man, I believe He's going to say, hello, Rick, come on in. And I believe He's going to say everything's going to be all right. Man, because He stretched out one day at Calvary. I'm glad He stretched out on me and shed His blood. Man, there ain't nobody like Him this morning. There ain't nobody ever loved you like Him. Hey, I don't know what step you're on this morning. You may be on the first one. Hey, the devil may be telling you what to use. Let me tell you something, there's a lot of use to keep going. Because, man, these folks that I love, it's already on the other side. There's some people that God brought into my life, some places I've been. It's going to be worth it when I get to that last step. Hey, you ain't looking at the real me this morning. Man, this old boy's going to have some hair on his head one day. He's going to have a new body. Man, I've got a baby up there in heaven I'm going to get to hold one day. Man, that boy and girl, that woman's going to go to heaven with me. Hey, I've got family security this morning. It makes a difference. Hey, young'uns, when them troubles come, do like this woman did. Run in that back room, shut the door, and get alone with God. Hey, that last step's going to make all the difference. Some of you in here's had loved ones that's went home recently. Hey, that last step will make the difference one day. That last step. You may be carrying a load this morning. Hey, your gladness may have turned to sadness. Hey, won't you come down to this old-fashioned altar this morning and talk to Him? Like that little old woman did. Hey, I believe she got alone with Him. I believe the sun come out, man, when she went in that room and got to that last step. Hey, I want you to stand to your feet for just a minute. Bow your heads, be real quiet and real still.